everyone. Welcome to HED Talks. And today we're going to continue on with our brand new series on human evolution that you asked me to do. That was just so thoughtful and considerate of you.
And this is so exciting.
It's very exciting. It's a lot of great information and intrigue and mystery. I think that's maybe the number one word is mystery, because evolution itself is evolving. All right, they're always finding something new. But first we're going to do what we always do, which is review. We're going to do a review. Last week I showed you something really kind of interesting. A very clever person designed all of Earth's history in a clock, a 24-hour time period. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yes, and it looked like this, as you recall. And when do humans appear?
2 seconds before.
24th hour.
Yeah, they arrive 1 minute, what would be 1 minute before midnight on the entire spectrum of life on Earth's history. So we have not been around for very long at all, have we? No, not in the fossil record anyways. Could that change?
Yes.
Sure, it could. It absolutely could. It's changing constantly all the time. And last week we said that we were going to stay pretty much in the Pleistocene era, because that's where humans existed, correct? But before we got there, I just wanted to share one interesting little note, and that was about dinosaurs. And do you remember what we said about dinosaurs?
They came before. They're still
Precursors
here in
of
birds.
birds.
Precursors of birds, exactly. I think it was Bob and Pat. Excellent, yes. So, scientists, paleontologists believe that there is evidence that birds today are the descendants of dinosaurs, and so they did not go extinct exactly. But then we had to get back to us, right? We're 1 minute before midnight on the time scale, and so we've got to get back to ourselves. And we are incredibly, remarkably, astoundingly the sole survivors, according to science. There is no other species that is singular. That's singular. Is there any other kind of animal or creature that is one species?
Can't think of any.
Human beings are the only ones that are a singular species, and so that's fascinating. And so the big question is, why? How did that happen? How did we become the sole survivor? And in the archaeological record, you see that they have found skulls from a multitude of different seeming skulls and skeletons and remains. And so of all of these, there's only one that ultimately survived, and that one is
Us.
Homo sapiens.
Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens sapien is what we're called. And I'll explain that in just a minute. Okay, so if you're going to track it down simplistically, there's a lot more, but just to keep it very simple, the hominid starts with, do you remember, the Australopithecus? Effie, did you just want to say that because it's fun to say? Yeah, Australopithecus afarensis. Isn't that fun to say? So it starts with the Australopithecine species, and there are several. They found several skulls of this particular species. And then we also last week went in from the Australopithecine into Homo habilis, as you recall. So we kind of covered that last week. What is the defining feature of a hominid?
Walking walking on 2 feet.
Yes, 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 they're bipeds, bipedalism, standing up and walking on 2 feet. And then we also discussed why that could have happened. Why might that have been a natural thing for them to do? And what the best theory right now is that the savanna, what happened to the forest in the savanna?
Everything started to change.
Yes, yes. It started to thin out, didn't it? It started to thin out. So if you had a species that was basically living in where?
The trees.
And the trees started to thin out and it looked like this, would that be a safe environment? No. So it's a matter of survival that they stand up, but they had to do something about that. They had to do something about that. So I don't know. I guess they could have just moved, but they didn't. They stood up instead. So they stood up, and when they did, we found that there were other advantages to that, and they are listed right here. But maybe the most predominant one would be if you're standing on your own 2 feet, what do you now have use of?
Your hands.
Both hands.
Yes, your hands. And what could that lead to?
Well, tool
Tool
making,
making.
foraging.
All kinds of things, right?
hunting, Yeah.
Yes, all kinds of things. Last week we looked at the first Australopithecus afarensis that was ever discovered. Remember her name?
Lucy.
Lucy, and there's Lucy right there. And the thing that was really blowing scientists away was this.
Hip.
Yeah.
What's that?
Pelvis?
Pelvis.
Yeah, hip bone. The
Connected
hip
to-
bone. Who's going to sing the song?
I just did.
You were going to sing the song? We'll be here for a while because there's lots of bones. Bones and bones, right? All right, so the reason why that was blowing them away is because this hip bone is the hip bone of what?
Woman.
A human.
Yeah.
A human hip bone, somebody that stands upright, and yet how old is Lucy thought to be? 3.2 million years old, and yet she has the hip bone of a biped. She has a biped hip bone. Okay, so this is the hip bone of a human, this is the hip bone of an ape, and when we go back and look at Lucy, what does she have?
She's good.
Hip bone of a human.
Yeah.
All right, you can see that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we just said she's discovered in Ethiopia and is thought to be 3.2 million years old. And then I also had to share with you, although I really didn't have to because you all seem to know, Lucy got her name because the #1 song on the radio at the time was what?
Lucy in the sky.
Yes, Pat, were you gonna give us a little?
I don't think I ever heard that song.
So, then you're not gonna sing that to us
No.
then. All right. Okay, so that's how she got her name, because the crew that discovered Lucy and got her out of the sand had to listen to that song over and over and over and over again. So they called her Lucy. Okay, so what else distinguishes the Australopithecine other than bipedalism?
Well,
Trunk?
no, they,
Tools.
Ah,
Tools.
oh, I was just gonna say that.
You were just going to say that? Yep,
Yeah.
and you would be right. You were just going to be right.
Tools.
So there's tools, and these are very crude, archaic tools. Here's some right here. All right, these are categorized or classified as the older one tools, and they're not very sophisticated, are they?
That's why I'm wondering, how do they know that? How do they know that they used them as a tool?
That's such a good point, Dolly. So that's a debate. That's an ongoing debate. It's also debated when they find remnants of fire pits way back. What if that was a natural fire? All right, so you're finding it, but So the other side to the story is they're definitely, oh, it just changed on me. They're definitely cut, all right? They have definite cuts on them. And so and of course, if they attached any kind of like a wood handle to it, wood's not gonna survive all that time, all right? But does it appear to be something that might have been just used in their hand? Sometimes there's grooves for fingers. There's finger grooves, so that would be a strong indicator. And then other times you'll find these Paleolithic tools that look as if they had been wound and then bound to a stick, and that could have been an axe or a hammer. So, but your questions are absolutely scientific, and that's what we're supposed to do, question everything. So we've got these Oldowan tools, rocks, hammers, and then we go from this kind of archaic technology into something a little bit more sophisticated, and that's when we get into the category called what? Homo habilis. All right, so homo is the Latin for man. Yep. Habilis, so it means handy. So it means handyman. Homo habilis means handyman. It's Latin. And then they of course have different species, and we also know this grouping as Homo erectus. Again, Latin just means upright man. Homo erectus means upright man. And we also saw in these skulls an increase in what?
Brain.
Yeah, in brain size. We saw an increase in brain size. Brain mass could go up and down in the different species, but the brain size, the brain definitely got bigger. The brain case got bigger. And the first one was found, do you remember Java Man? Mm-hmm. Yes, was found in Indonesia, and at the time they weren't sure what they had. They really just weren't sure at all what they had, but they went back and they kept looking for more artifacts, and this is what they found. They're dated to 700,000 to 2 million years ago. And they went back because they also found a similar skull. Do you remember? Who was next? Peking.
Oh, the Peking.
Remember Peking Man? Yeah, Peking Man. He was found near a cave near Beijing, and so he too is from the Homo habilis, Homo erectus. And we just took a look at the cave where they found it, and the cave now is a museum, of course. Yeah, a museum. All right, and these are the artifacts that they found in that cave from that time period. All right, with Homo erectus, what was one of the predominant features?
The brows.
Yeah, the brow ridge, and then as we went on, further.
He's got pretty good teeth too.
They have that. I'm so glad, because you know what? I forgot to mention that, John. So yes. So now again, remember the black is putty that they're using to fill in.
Oh.
So when you see the black, that isn't. They didn't. I mean, these things are ancient, so they're not in one piece. All right, but these are the teeth that were left. All right, and these are the teeth that were left. And then all of this would be the skull that they had found, and then the black is filled in. But you're right, so the teeth, that's one of the main ways to determine, all right, to extract DNA, to find out the age. Teeth are really important in the research. And if you take a look here, the teeth look what?
Ground down.
But they look
White.
fairly modern, right? They look fairly modern. Now look at Cro-Magnon, and don't they look very similar?
Yeah.
All right, so you've got this with similar teeth, but this pronounced brow ridge, and then you've got Cro-Magnon, who you can see some familiar features, but what's missing completely?
Brows.
Completely. And so, of course, they have to speculate, and that's all you can really do is speculate. What would be the benefit of losing that intense brow ridge? And they thought that because they didn't have language, an articulate language, that using facial expressions was a form of communication.
I think we're still doing that.
We do. Look it up. Look at her. Do you remember the little girl from last week that I had?
Yes.
The little eyebrow girl?
Yeah.
Just love her.
Yeah.
The little eyebrow girl. So we still do that. We can communicate today without saying a word, just by giving somebody a look. Mothers have that down totally.
Yeah.
Have that down. You don't have to say one word. All right. So that could have been a reason to emphasize the facial features to allow for that kind of communication. Speculation, that's their guess, that's their best guess, but we are very, very good at that. They also thought that perhaps this, do you remember this from last week? That these scratches were art. And it wasn't because they found one shell with some faint scratching on it, it's because they found it many times. And they're similar, they have a similarity. So is this art, or symbols, or writing, or what is it?
Creativity, which I think that they would identify that as coming from creation.
Yes. Yep.
It almost
So-
looks like mountains. Like they might be drawing mountains.
And we also have to remember too that when we're looking at these things, we can't help it, we're all ethnocentric, right?
Yeah.
We're going to guess at this based on
What
what
we
we know. All right, so it could be something totally different. We have to remember that we're influenced by our own culture and by our own life experiences. So we would read into it with ethnocentricity. Okay, and then they also found this, and everybody thought that this wasn't a tool. Remember from last week? Yes, everyone said this is not a tool, that this is artistic, that this is a woman. Everybody in the room thought that this was a woman
Yeah.
With no neck.
with no neck. This is a woman with no neck.
But she's got boobs. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yes, they do seem to be very into like fertility.
Yeah.
All right, there were some things I just could not put up here for you. All right. I had to avoid them. Okay. All right. So we did agree, all of us, that this definitely looks like art. This wouldn't be a tool, but that this is probably art. And so now we go into further advancements, and most strikingly in the tools and weapons. Right? You remember these?
Mm-hmm.
They look a lot more like So Dolly, you would look at this and say, oh yes, someone absolutely did fashion these. That these are spearheads. We know they're spearheads. We identify them and we recognize them. And then there are some other tools. Very sharp. They're very sharp too. Very sharp knives. And then further, this is one thing. Do you remember from last
All
week?
sides.
Yeah, so this is one item shown in 4 different ways, and this is also the advent of using bone, not rock, but bone. So animal bone to make tools, and the way that this is cut, it's barbed there, and it looks like it could be for
Slicing.
fishing or something like that. We also talked about what could be the benefit of losing our hair. So losing our hair was in the Homo erectus time frame. And when we lost hair, what benefit did that give us?
You move faster.
I'm sorry?
Ability to cool
It
off.
allowed us to perspire.
It allowed us to perspire, and when we perspire, we're able to do long distance sustained running. But if you're chasing your prey, even if it's a big woolly mammoth, if you're chasing the woolly mammoth, he cannot run for very long, because how does an animal cool down?
Through its breathing.
Yeah.
Yes, they have to pant. They have to stop and they have to pant. They cannot pant while they're running. And so these people, these merciless people, kept chasing and chasing and chasing till they're just completely exhausted. And then they would go in with spears and up close and personal knives and go in for the hunt. All right, and it's also, we remember this time, period of time where they are thought to have controlled fire. All right, controlled fire, cook their food, and what's the benefit to the brain if you're cooking your food?
Nutrition.
Bacteria and virus.
Yes, yep, so there's protein, and it tastes better, right? It just tastes better.
There's protein in them.
Healthier too.
Okay,
They don't taste as good.
that they live in caves, that was an easy one. But something that was really astounding is that they may have been, I don't know, on logs or carved out canoes or some such thing like that. And the reason why they think that is because they found artifacts where they just should not be. Do you remember that from last week?
Yeah.
They shouldn't be there, and they shouldn't be at the level where they discovered them. How did these things get there? And some of the famous ones were the island of Flores, which we know, remember, where was Java Man from?
China.
Indonesia. Well, okay, but how did things get here? How did artifacts and tools get there? All right, it would be hard to swim there. Okay, oops. And then also in the Philippines, and then the most astonishing one was Crete, because Crete is so far, far from any other land. So that was very astonishing. And you may recall from last week that geologists confirmed that there was water mass there as we know it at that time. So there was no land bridge at that time, according to the best science we have to date. And if that is the case, well, then they probably had a form of communication, right? Because you wouldn't just hop on a log with somebody without knowing where you were going in the water. So there probably was a form of communication and collaboration, but was there language? And the answer to that is no, there wasn't. Because in these skeletal remains, the hyoid bone was not developed enough to have articulate language. So there would have been sounds, there would have been able to make sounds, but not the articulate language that we have. Don't I sound very conceited there? That we have.
No, it would be
articulate
grunting,
language.
wouldn't it? They would just grunt.
Guttural sounds, grunting, yes. But it certainly seems like they were able to communicate effectively. And the reason why we think that is because we have skeletal remains of, this is one of the most famous examples of this. So the skeleton was of a man, this is about 40,000 years old, and he is an older person, considered older, so he was in his 40s. He had no teeth, but the sockets had healed over. So he had no teeth for a long time. It was long enough for the sockets to have healed over. What does that suggest?
He was taken care of.
Yes, would
He was
someone
eating too
have,
many sweets.
yeah,
Too much candy.
too much sugar cane. Who, would you have had to have ground his food?
Ah,
Yep.
You'd have to grind his food. He'd probably be able to feed himself, maybe, but you would have had to have taken care of him. And then we had a few other examples of that they did have a community, that they did seem to take care of one another, and furthermore, that when one of their clan died,
burial.
They mourned him.
yes, and that there seemed to be a burial and a burial ceremony of some sort. So they're placed very particularly buried, but in the burial site, there's floral resin, all right, and evidence that maybe they painted the body, or some artifact that was in there also, because there's resin in there for that as well. And so now we see the progression of the Australopithecus into the Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and then we graduate to who's next?
Is that Cro-Magnon?
Homo sapien.
Neanderthal. Everyone
Close.
says Neanderthal because of the spelling, but the correct pronunciation is Neanderthal. All right, so we're going to take a look at Neanderthal meets who?
Cro-Magnon.
Cro-Magnon. Who's Cro-Magnon?
Not sure.
Us.
Us. Us. Modern man. The precursor to modern man. All right, so we know, all right, from the archaeological record that there is a migration that comes out of Africa and it goes into where?
It's like Spain and Europe.
Europe.
France and Spain.
Yes, France, Spain, Germany. Yes, you're exactly right. All right, and they are called Neanderthal because they are named after the location where they were found. And the very first Neanderthal skull was found in the Neander Valley, which is in Germany. Okay, in the Neander Valley in 1856 is when he was discovered. Okay, there's the cave right there where it was discovered. They weren't looking for artifacts. You know what they were looking for? They were looking for limestone. These were miners. These were miners. They weren't archaeologists. All right, this didn't exist yet. This field of study didn't exist in 1856. So when they found this skull, what do you think the quarry workers, the miners, what do you think they thought when they found this skull?
Time to get out of here.
They thought it was a murder victim.
Ah,
They thought it was a human murder victim. And so they reported having found it. So they really did not know what they had, all right? So scientists of the day were looking at it. They thought it was human, but it was clearly different. So they thought this was a deformed human being. It thought it was a deformed human being. But then they found a little bit more. Here's some more from Neander Valley, all right? And they found that, well, the body doesn't quite fit that of a normal human being. And so again, what they just kept thinking was, this is, what we're finding is people must have just abandoned deformed people, you know, because they couldn't contribute or whatever reason they would have, that they just abandoned these people. They thought what they were just finding were humans with severe deformities, and that they were just abandoned and left to fend on their own and died in these caves. But then something really interesting happened in 1859. Does anybody remember what happened in 1859?
Ah.
Darwin.
Oh, yes. Charles Darwin finally published. It took him a really long time. He finally published, and when scientists started reading this, they're remembering these strange things, right? And so what happens? What gets cracked wide open?
How we came to exist.
A whole new field of study, right? A brand new field of study. All right, so now scientists are going to go look for more of these strange skulls and bones. All right, they're going to go look for them. And where's the best place you could possibly go look for them?
Africa,
Not just Africa.
the Great Rift.
Yes, why would that be?
Is that where Leahy went?
Because of the stratum.
Excellent, excellent. Because of the stratum. Do you see here?
Yeah.
The rift is what? It's the earth is doing what? It's splitting open. All right, so the integrity of the ground, the rock underneath the earth, has been compromised. And so it's sinking, sinking, sinking. And as it sinks, it's pushing out the earth around it. And so right here, you've got layers upon layers upon layers of what? You're going back in what? Time. You're going back in time. So the scientists are saying to themselves, if we want to understand this, we want to find more artifacts, where do we go? We go to the Rift Valley and we start digging, and we're going to go, as you go down, you're going further and further and further back in time. There it goes. There's no sound to it. Look at that.
The other Grand Canyon.
The other Grand Canyon, that's exactly right.
Wow. And that's in Ethiopia?
It's in East Africa. It covers quite a large
It said Mozambique.
area. I'm sorry?
It said Mozambique in the
Yes.
Mozambique.
Yep.
Syria to Mozambique.
Yes, it covers quite a large area
Yeah.
of the continent. So now they're going to go look for these things, right? Now they have a clue. Now they know what it is, or they have some frame of reference. So now they're going to look. Before they weren't looking for any of this. All right. Now they are on the hunt. And what are they thinking at first? What are they thinking at first? That there's there's Australopithecus afarensis, who morphs into Africanus, who morphs into Robustus, who morphs into... It didn't go like that, did it? No, there were multiple species that coexisted. They're all there at the same time. All right? So the scientists have one thought in their mind, but they're coming up with these variations, and so they have to rethink and recalculate and redocument. So it's just it is itself evolving all the time. Here's Neanderthal. That's what he looks like. All right? That's what he looks like. Yes.
Very
I
long
had my
arms.
genome done with 23andMe. I'm 2% Neanderthal.
That's exactly right. Most of us are.
Yeah.
Most of us are.
2%?
All right. What? But you're taking my big surprise away.
Oh. Oh,
For those
Bob,
that
Bob.
didn't know.
Oh, no.
That was my big reveal at the end. Barb.
I'll go stand in
We have to talk before the. We'll talk ahead of time. All right, and Pat usually does that to me. This is no, I think most people do know that now. This is Neanderthal. All right, again, remember the black is what?
Clearly.
Yeah. All right. So look at him. So that's what he looks like. That's not too unhuman, is it?
No,
They were, as we discover more and more and more, and we get more artifacts, we're discovering that they really were very, very similar to modern humans, much more so than we originally thought. All right, these are the locations where they were discovered, where their remains were discovered. This is a cave that had Neanderthal remains in France. Do you know what you're looking at? Look at that.
well,
That is, maybe, it could, oh, is it? Okay, I'll see you, I'll email you, okay?
it looks like a bog underground.
It does, but these are stromatolites that were stacked up.
They were in it.
Stacked up.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah. Stromatolites that were taken off the wall and then somebody had to have stacked them up.
Ah.
So is this a form of ancient art? All right, or severe boredom, or what is this? We don't know. We
Maybe
just
they
don't
just
know.
wanted to tidy it up.
Yeah.
Or they would just wanted to tidy it up.
Yeah.
Yes. So we don't know, but that's very interesting. They were stacked up. Was it done by the Neanderthals? Was it done? Somebody else came along later. It's all speculative. That's all we can really do. Here's one in Spain. There's a cave in Spain where they found remains of Neanderthal. All right, and then they also found remains of Neanderthal on their way to Spain. What's this?
Gibraltar.
Yes, yes, Gibraltar, Strait of Gibraltar. Yes, so there's so they were there, and here is a cave in Iraq. All right, and then here's another one, and this one's really interesting. Here's a cave where they found remains in Siberia. Except, you know what's really interesting about this one?
They're not the same.
Oh my gosh, Bob, you're so great at this. You're very good.
What did
You
it
get.
Denisovians.
Oh my goodness! Did you? Yes.
No, what did it say?
Did you major in human evolution? All right. So this cave in Siberia. So they're finding remains, all right. But when they go back to the lab and they're taking a really close look at them, guess what? They're not Homo sapien. They're not Neanderthal. They're something else Bob's going to tell us.
Denisovians.
They're Denisovians, which is a whole other category. Do you see how they just keep finding stuff? It gets more and more complicated as we go along. All right, so now in the same time period, we have Denisovians, we have Neanderthal, and we have who? Cro-Magnon. Now, here's where we want to talk about what does it mean, Homo sapiens sapiens? It means, again, this is the Latin. It means man who knows that he knows. So it's an element of consciousness that didn't seem to exist before. So wise man, a man who knows, but he doesn't just know, he's aware that he has a consciousness. So Homo sapiens sapiens, they're all together at the same time. Let's look at their brains. Okay? Modern human, Neanderthal, Denisovian. Do you know who of these guys has the smallest brain?
Us.
The what? Wait a minute.
We got
Wait
the
a
larger
second.
brain, don't we?
How can that be? What, Pat?
Don't we have a larger brain?
Well, you would think so, but here, you're looking at it right here. We have the smallest brain of the three existing species of hominid in that area at that time. We have the smallest brain, but from the exoskeleton, they can make a mold of the skull, and what they've discovered is that in the modern man, in the Cro-Magnon, it might be smaller, but the bulk of the brain is in the frontal lobe, and what does the frontal lobe do? It's your center of what? Excellent. Yes, it's the center of logic. This is where you're doing your what? Thinking. Exactly. So we've got the other two, and they're larger brained, but that extra space could be focused on physical survival, physical strength, physical abilities, because we do know that the other two species were, go ahead, John.
You know, it might be that through the years, the modern human brain became more efficient, so it wasn't as large as the others.
Yes. I think
Be a
you're
lot more
right.
bone too.
Yes. Yes. Yes, they have this extra bulge. The occipital bun is what they call it. Although humans have that too. Some, not all, but some humans have that. All right. So what the molds are telling us is that it did, John, just as what you were saying. It became efficient because the area of the brain that produces thought, judgment, critical thinking, that was the predominant part. Here is the three. Okay, so you can do a side-by-side comparison of them. All right? They don't look that different, do they? No, they really don't look that different. Then I also wanted to get for you a Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon side-by-side, because this one does kind of look. You can see the differences. See the difference in the height. Neanderthal was kind of stout and stocky, and look at see this barrel chest right here, where this is more narrow. Yeah. Yep. So that's the difference, but you can see that it's not hugely different. Okay, so if we've got Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon, they're coexisting, all right? We also have artifacts from that time. Now these are tools, don't they look far more complex?
Yeah.
What's this, do you know?
Needle.
It's a sewing needle, exactly, Bob. It's a sewing needle. What were they doing?
Making clothes.
Yes. Yeah, they were making clothes that fit, that were more efficient for them. Let's look at some other things. What else did they do? Do these tools look a little bit more complex?
Yeah, they're arrows.
Yep. This is very familiar. I mean, these look like Clovis points that we would find in more modern times in America, right? Yep. What about this?
Tomahawk.
Yes, now see, so this is, and Dolly, this is what we were talking about before. This was put onto this rock by modern people, all right? But because they could see that there was an indentation where it's from what remained, it looks like that's how that must have gone. Yeah.
But
Bob
over
said
time,
that
the other stuff
they
had
also
disappeared.
buried people with some of these items. So.
That's exactly how, that's how they get the artifacts.
Yeah, that
Is
makes
from, yep, is from
Very
it's from
hard.
their burials. Now this is just like how many of you have had a pocket knife in your life? Yes, right? A pocket knife, and you use it for all kinds of stuff. You always have your pocket knife. Roland's going to pull out his pocket knife. He's got it with him right now. So this would be, all right, this would be an ancient, archaic pocket knife. Okay, you just never know when you might need one. All right? What about art? Who's thought to have been the first artists? We might go over a little bit. Is that okay with everybody? Because we started a little late.
Spanish, maybe?
All right, so Cro-Magnon is given credit for the art, but they don't, it's debated. Was it Neanderthal? Was it Cro-Magnon? They coexisted. They lived in these same places. All right, and we find this artwork in the caves. This is cave art. It is magnificent. It's beautiful. I could look at this for hours and hours. I'm going to share some with you. Isn't that stunning?
Yeah.
These are tens of thousands of years old.
Hey,
Cave art.
And these are ones in France?
Some of them are in France, some of them are in Spain, some of them are in Germany. Look at that. And also it is Cro-Magnon who is credited with decorating the body with jewelry. Here's some ancient jewelry. All right, some ancient artwork. You want to see a great one?
Mm-hmm.
Look at this.
Wow.
It's made out of ivory.
Mm.
Yeah. Yep. And then those are animal teeth. They bore a hole into it and they would have sewn it, used their sewing needle to string it up. Did you also know that they were musicians? Bob probably did. This is an ancient flute.
Ah,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
An ancient flute. And what about that?
Whistle.
It's a whistle, exactly, John, exactly. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that wonderful? All right, there's something else. So somebody said they find in the burial sites that they're buried with what must be their personal items, their tools, that there probably were flowers in there, that maybe they painted and prepared the body. But guess what else they found in the Cro-Magnon burial sites?
animals?
Yes! How did you know that?
I just,
Not animals
well,
in general, but dogs.
uh,
Dogs.
wolves.
Some people were buried with their dogs. So Cro-Magnon had man's best friend. All right? They coexisted. That it's the Cro-Magnon that had dogs.
Now I know where my husband comes from.
There you go. Your husband's Don's a Cro-Magnon.
Came
He's
to this class.
Cro-Magnon. Yes. Yes.
You had doubts, Tony.
All right, so they're coexisting. All right. Oh, you can't really see that. All right, so it's Cro-Magnon appears in Europe 50,000 years ago. Neanderthal, a very successful species, hundreds of thousands of years they existed, but they disappeared 10,000 years after Cro-Magnon shows up.
Cro-Magnon beat them up, maybe, and killed them.
Oh, so that's what scientists are trying to figure out.
War.
Why? What happened? They existed successfully for so long, and then they existed twice. We haven't even reached that yet. Okay, but they disappear from the fossil record. Yes, Barbara.
Now, why would I have Neanderthal genes, whatever? Why wouldn't I have Cro-Magnon?
Well, let's look at that. All right, you do, because Cro-Magnon is Homo sapiens. All right, so they coexist All right, for thousands of years they coexist. All right, so they're thinking there is a common ancestor between Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal. There's a common ancestor. All right, but what caused Neanderthal to disappear? What caused them to disappear? And that is one of the great questions. So Pat, one of the first things is that scientists speculate. They don't know. They're guessing too.
Fighting over land.
Well, no, I think there was plenty of land back then. There isn't today, but back then. But that when the two met, when Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal met, that Cro-Magnon outsmarted them, outhunted them, that they just took over, and that maybe they fought them. But is that an ethnocentric kind of an idea? Because we are very warlike, aren't we?
Yep.
So would we assume that because our history that we know of is very warlike?
Esther made an important point. She said there must have been some intermarriage.
Yes, I think.
Well, there had to have been because we're going to get to there.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to get there in 1 second. All right, so they're also thinking that because of the Ice Age, that Cro-Magnon, now in the Ice Age, you have to remember there's intermittent periods of warmer weather and colder weather. It's not like solid ice. So that Cro-Magnon was able to think their way through survival techniques. Also that Cro-Magnon is definitely in the fossil record had larger clans, larger groups. So it was a larger society, more people to help out. And that Neanderthal had very small, intimate clans, or it may be like, 9, 10 people in a clan, whereas Cro-Magnon had much, much more than that. So that's a possibility. All right, they're going to survive just in pure numbers. But the truth is, we don't know. We just don't know what happened when they met and what kind of interaction they had until science discovered what? DNA, exactly. Science discovered DNA. And when they discovered DNA, and they were able to do DNA testing on these fossils from the bones, guess what they found out?
The intermingled.
Integrated.
That Homo sapiens have some, very small amount, some Neanderthal DNA. And not only that, but that the Neanderthal DNA has effect on us in ways that will really surprise you. I'm going to let the scientists tell you about that.
Over the past about 10 years or so, there's been a revolution in our ability to read DNA from ancient fossils. And this has revealed some amazing things about recent human evolutionary history. And one of the most striking is that humans, our ancestors, interbred with Neanderthals. This is about 50,000 years ago that this happened. And there's still a remnant of that interbreeding in the genomes of many modern humans living today. Really unique opportunity here at Vanderbilt to study this question because Vanderbilt has a database called BioView. And it's a large database of electronic medical records from patients in the hospital that have been anonymized, so all the identifying information has been removed. We used a large database of about 28,000 people for which we could have genetic information. So we could look at their DNA derived from their blood samples and predict where each person had Neanderthal DNA. We found that Neanderthal DNA indeed does influence many traits in modern humans. And it's a diverse array of traits. So traits involved in the immune system, traits involved in our skin, but also traits, psychiatric traits and neurological traits. We found that Neanderthal variants influence your risk for a skin disease called actinic keratosis. These little scaly lesions you get on your skin as you're aging and getting lots and lots of sun exposure. And it's very possible that whatever those variants were doing back then may actually have been protective. But now, in current levels of sun exposure, in current environments, it's not good for us. So, I mean, another immune-related phenotype that we found a very, very strong association with was something called hypercoagulability. So that sounds complicated, but it just means your blood clots more quickly. And that's another example of something that could be bad in modern environments. Can lead to all sorts of things like strokes and embolisms. It's possible that this hypercoagulation was good for us back then in healing wounds and fighting off pathogens, and now that's not such a problem for us. It's bad to have thicker blood in many cases. A couple of the really unexpected associations we found were with what I'll broadly call some psychiatric traits. So, for example, we found that if we looked at Neanderthal variants overall in an individual, we could better predict their risk for depression. And now I want to be clear, that's not that Neanderthals are just making us depressed. It's some Neanderthal DNA increases your risk, and other bits of Neanderthal DNA, other parts of your genome, decreases your risk. We're now working towards understanding sort of at the low molecular level how these bits of Neanderthal DNA are influencing these associations with diseases we found. And so one of the, I'll just say that in doing that, we may better understand the basis for these diseases, the genetic basis for these diseases, and understanding the evolution, where these bits of DNA that cause disease came from may help us understand how to better avoid them.
Isn't that amazing?
It is
Yeah.
amazing.
Is that fascinating? But I have more interesting news to tell you. I have more incredible science to tell you. So now we have the DNA strand you're looking at right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that tells us, what proteins are going to trigger, what determines our hair color and or our eye color or whatever it's going to go into. And then at first scientists thought the rest of the strand was useless. Do you remember that? Like they didn't know what it was for. There were only certain connections that were determinants. And then they didn't know what the rest of it was for. They just thought it was kind of like useless. Until recently. And do you know what the rest of it's for? The rest of it determines whether you turn the genetic switch on or the genetic switch off. Okay? So the whole DNA strand, you have your determinant. Now let's say you have a determinant and you have it, from your Neanderthal DNA, and you have thick blood, all right? When they're able to control the genetic switches in the DNA, what would they be able to do?
Get out the blood. Get out the
Correct that.
Yep.
Or anything, the genetic switch, once they get it all worked out, what they're hoping is that they will be able to turn on the things that are desirable and turn off the things that are not desirable.
Well, they're currently using medications to do that,
Yes,
but
Or like-
eventually they'll be able to.
yes.
There's
So
also surgery now where they're replacing little
Exactly.
parts.
isn't that incredible?
Is that part of
Science incredible?
Is that also
Right.
part of like with the, where you can determine if it's a boy or girl, or you can determine if you're gonna have blue eyes or brown
Yes,
eyes?
yeah,
Oh,
DNA is, the DNA is the determinant, that's what determines.
So they can go in and do that, and like if you had cystic fibrosis, they're working on fixing that because if they find the connecting gene.
Yeah,
Okay,
isn't that amazing?
that is amazing.
So if Neanderthal gave you something good, we'll just keep that switch on. But if they gave you something that you don't need anymore, well then we'll just switch that off.
Where can I sign up?
You want to sign up for that? Sign up for that?
Please.
Sickle cell anemia just was in the newspaper this week.
Oh, no kidding.
And they're finding a way to turn off that switch for
Wow.
all those poor people who get that awful disease.
Yes, and there's so many
Wow.
diseases, so many things that could correct. It's exciting science. It's very,
Yes.
very exciting science. I also have one more bit of exciting news to share with
I
you.
don't think I could stand
Whoa.
it.
I don't think you can stand anymore either. So I'm going to give you 1 week to just calm down and get yourself prepared for this. Next week, we're going to continue on with our Homo sapiens sapien because we're going to go into modern man and we're going to start talking about ancient civilizations. And to kick us off is our very own John, who's been doing our videography.
He's ancient.
He's not ancient, but he has studied. John, you're not ancient.
Getting there.
Getting there. But he has studied out in Arizona, New Mexico. He has studied,
Isn't that beautiful?
I know, isn't that gorgeous?
That is beautiful.
Yes, so I'm not going to give any of it away, but next week, John is going to be our guest speaker.
Oh,
All right? I know, isn't that exciting? And he has a presentation for us, and he's going to share with us all of his research that he's done while out in New Mexico. And then the following, and then we're just going to keep on going on with ancient civilizations. Does that sound good to everybody?
Yes.
All right, great. Well, I thank you for staying a little bit later. I thank you for coming, and I will see you all next week.